Hello and welcome everyone to Managing Debt So It Doesn't Manage You. My name is Krista Danis and I'm the Events and Program Coordinator at the Aurora Public Library District. Tonight we are celebrating Money Smart Week and Financial Literacy Month with important information on a topic that I think almost every adult is familiar with, and that is debt. So thank you so much to everyone tuning in from home on Zoom or Facebook Live. And thank you to our amazing partners who have made this important event possible. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by Representative Barbara Hernandez. Welcome. And
thank you for having me.
Of course. And we could not have offered this information without the expertise of our friends at the KCT Credit Union, who are committed to financial literacy and community education. Our presenter this evening is Marlon Glenn from KCT. Welcome, Marlon, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So if you're interested in further opportunities for financial literacy education at the library, we have a few programs coming up that you might be interested in checking out. First, we have Financial Strategies for Early College Planners on Tuesday, April 20th at 6:30. And then next, you can hear from the Illinois State's Attorney's Office on how to prevent fraud on Thursday, April 22nd at 2 p.m. And finally, we are offering an introduction to the Aurora Financial Empowerment Center on Monday, April 26th at 6 p.m. These are all available virtually, so make sure to register on our website at aurorapubliclibrary.org. So before I turn it over to Representative Hernandez, let's take care of some logistical details for the evening. Closed captions are available tonight, and if you don't already see them, you can turn them on and turn them off by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your page, and then clicking show or hide subtitles. And also we will be doing a Q&A at the end of the session this evening. So if you're on Zoom, you can go ahead and use that Q&A function and pop your question in there, and we will make sure to get to it at the end. And if you're on Facebook, you can use the comment section and put your questions on in there. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Representative Hernandez. Hi.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm in Springfield. I'm doing a bit of a legislative work here, but I'm excited to be able to join you virtually and provide this information to you. And thank you so much for KCT, Marlene, and the Aurora Public Library, Krista, so much for having us and having this important topic. As we all are aware, we have some sort of debt. I know I have student loans that I still need to pay off. So I know everybody has a certain debt in a way, and I think it's really important to learn how to manage it and how to pay it off as soon as possible so it doesn't beat us. So I hope everybody enjoys this conversation today, and please remember to ask your questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Hernandez. And with that, we'll turn it over to Marlon Glenn, and we can start our program this evening.
All right, thank you so much. I am going to share my screen here. And first and foremost, again, I do want to thank Representative Hernandez as well as the Aurora Public Library for supporting us and getting some financial wellness out to our communities. Again, my name is Marlon Glenn. I'm the financial wellness educator here with KCT Credit Union. I want to thank everybody that's joining us today for logging in with us today or joining us, whether it's via Facebook Live or via Zoom. My hope for tonight's webinar is to give you some insight and some tools to better manage your debt, as well as some information on how debt coincides and affects your credit. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started here. So as you can see on your screens, tonight we'll discuss what debt is and the different types of credit as they relate, to the debt that you might have. Some warning signs, what to look for that you might have too much debt, and some ideas on how you might be able to kind of dig your way out or methods to pay down on that debt or at least better manage it. So many of us are not quite sure where to start when we talk about managing our debt or maybe how to pay it down. So what does it take? Typically I do these seminars in person. Unfortunately, for the last year or so, I have not been able to. I usually will ask that question and kind of wait for some answers. Really, ideally, what it takes willpower, to really climb out of, depending on how much debt you might have, it takes some willpower for us, some perseverance, and really a commitment to change and making an actual serious plan, possibly breaking old habits, but it's certainly going to take some determination. And ideally, it's going to take knowing where you currently stand. So, one of the very first steps that I like to make sure that everybody starts with is to know how much debt you have. A lot of times it's kind of like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil type of thing. If we kind of, put our hands over our ears or over our eyes, we hope that that debt kind of goes away or doesn't exist. And a lot of times we don't know exactly how much debt we have or what interest rates that debt is at and how much it's actually costing us. So one of the very, very first things that needs to be done is to do a personal debt inventory, because it's important that you know where you are so that you know where you're going to go or where you need to go to. So I do have a couple of worksheets that I'm just going to kind of flash up for you, so that you can see. Um, and I would be more than happy to share these with the Aurora Public Library, or, if you want to reach out to me directly, I'd be more than happy to share these. But, whether you use a worksheet like this or whether you just use a pencil and a notepad, go ahead and take an inventory of all your debt. It may be scary, and it may be overwhelming, but it's a necessity. It's something that you absolutely need to do. You should absolutely know where you stand when it comes to all of the debt, whether that's credit card debt, your mortgage, your car loans, student debt, which is a huge, Representative Hernandez alluded to it. Student debt is huge for a lot of us these days. So knowing what those balances are, knowing what your monthly payment is very, very important. And it's one of the very first steps that you need to take in getting a handle on your debt and maintaining hopefully what's good credit, or maybe improving your credit, because debt really plays a huge role when it comes to credit. And we will talk about that here in a bit. But what is debt? We start with that. Debt is really the act of borrowing money with the understanding that you're going to repay it. Usually it comes with some sort of a contract or an agreement. Many times it comes with fees, and unfortunately, sometimes with high interest rates, which can sometimes affect how you make those actual payments. Again, in order to obtain or maintain good credit or to improve a credit score, you need to know how to handle debt, because these go hand in hand. And there are different types of debt or credit. As you can see on the slide here, the left column are all of your secured fixed installment loans, like your car, your student loans, or maybe your mortgage or home equity loan. And the right side of all of those columns is your unsecured, revolving, and variable interest type of debt, meaning these don't have collateral. They can usually get us in trouble a lot quicker because these are usually our credit cards or maybe our unsecured type of loans. So these can really get out of control very, very quickly. They're not as structured as your installment loans per se. So, your secured credit, this usually is going to carry more weight when it comes to your credit report. So your car loans, your mortgage, these typically have a little bit of more influence when it comes to your credit score, because these are typically given to you by an actual lender, whether that's your bank, your credit union. There's usually going to be a little bit more work that goes into obtaining one of these fixed installment secured types of debts or credit. Whereas your credit cards, while if you haven't established your credit yet, it may be difficult to kind of obtain that first credit card. But typically your store credit cards are fairly easy to get, those credit cards. Maybe some kind of a gas station type of credit card. Those are usually a little bit easier, but unfortunately come with much higher interest rates for the most part. So those types of credit or debt translate into, four main sources, of debt for most consumers. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, are there any benefits to having debt on my credit, or is taking debt on ever a good idea? Well, let's talk about those. There could be such a good thing as good debt, because used wisely, it can enhance your lifestyle. It can make it easier for you to purchase larger items like a home or a vehicle, right? Most of us don't have, $150,000 to pay cash for our homes. Most of us don't have, $20,000 or $25,000 to buy a new car. And certainly a lot of us, have student loan debt. So those can all be considered good debt because they are enhancing your lifestyle in some way, shape, or form. While student loan debt is a huge problem these days, regardless, hopefully it's enhancing your lifestyle. Hopefully it got you to a better position at work. Maybe you went back to college at some point so that you can get that promotion, or so that you can get that, next job that you've been hoping for. So that is definitely something that enhanced our lifestyle or made things better for us. A home, obviously having a mortgage loan and having a home, the hope there is that it's always going to appreciate. We have, however, lived in a lifetime where we've seen homes depreciate, but for the most part, it's assumed that our home will continue to appreciate. And then in the end, when we have that home paid off, we can sell it and downsize and have a little bit for our retirement. So there is such a thing as having good debt. And bad debt, as you can see here, does not increase your wealth in any way, shape, or form. And it's used to purchase goods or use services that usually have no real lasting value. Those jeans that you had to have last month that you put on that credit card that you haven't quite paid off, and hopefully you are going to pay off. Those jeans didn't really give you anything of real lasting value. So that is more considered a bad debt, which can be costly, again, depending on how you utilize it. So I like to tell people it's really not credit cards that are bad. It's the way that we use credit cards and our habits, and what maybe we purchase with those credit cards, or the fact that maybe we're not paying those off as soon as we make that purchase. The ideal way, and I know this isn't the understanding credit session, but the ideal way to use your credit card is to use it and pay that balance off. And you can pay that balance off immediately. You do not need to wait for your monthly mortgage statement to come in the mail or through your email, if you do everything online now. But that would be the ideal way, is use that credit card, pay it off. Use it, pay it off. But it's really the habits that we've kind of gotten into. It's more the convenience of, I'm just going to put it on my credit card and wait for that bill to come in the mail. And if I have the money, then I'll pay it off. And if I don't, unfortunately, most of us have fallen into that cycle. Or if I don't, it's a pretty small minimum payment. So as you can see in this example here, if you had $20,000 worth of credit card debt at an interest rate of 18%, which is actually low considering the average credit card rate is about 19%. But if you had it at 18% and you made just that minimum payment, which is roughly around 2% on $20,000, that calculates out to about $400 a month. Very little of that payment is going to pay down this balance of $20,000. So if you only made those minimum payments, it would take you 20 years to pay off this $20,000. And in that 20 years, you will have paid over $54,000 worth of interest. So when you calculate that, $20,000 over 20 years, a total of $74,000, that APR, which your APR is calculating all that interest that you're paying over time that's kind of accumulating in and on itself, you will have paid 270% on that $20,000. That is insanity, right? Who wants to pay 270% on anything, right? Much less on a credit card, and much less for things like a pair of jeans or that dress, or getting your nails done or your hair done, or whatever that might be. You have nothing. If you have nothing to show for it, that's a huge red flag. So on a smaller scale, as you can see here, on $1,000, you see the difference of if you had a 10% interest rate in that first left column there under the $1,000. If you had borrowed $1,000 at 10%, you made that minimum payment of $40, it would take you about 29 months to pay that $1,000 off. 29 months. You will have paid about $126 in interest. Now, if we look all the way to the right there, that same $1,000, if we consider that maybe your credit score is not so great, your interest rate is at 25%, and you're still making that minimum payment of $40, it's going to take you 3 years, and you will have paid $427 in interest alone. That's a $300 difference there. Not to mention, the additional 7 months that it took you to pay that down, but $300. I don't know about you, but I don't have an extra $300 just laying around. So this is a really great example that I like showing, because it can really kind of show you the comparison of, what potentially maybe a good a good credit score might be to obtain a lower interest rate versus maybe a not so great credit score. You might end up with that higher interest rate. I like to give the example with what we would be able to offer, a credit union. And I can only obviously speak for what KCT does. But if you were to buy a vehicle today, say a 2020 car, and your credit score was 780 or above, you could get an interest rate today of 2.49%. If you compare that to if your credit score is between 620 and under 660, which is an okay credit score, not so great, but it's okay, that interest rate jumps up to 11.24%. It's almost a 9% difference on the interest rate. So when we're looking at this particular screen, that 10% compared to that 25%, this is like for real, right? This is assuming that it's maybe a credit card, $1,000 credit card. But when you're talking, an auto or car loan, something like a 9% difference for a 5-year loan can be a huge difference. Here we're talking 7 months, you paid an extra $300. Just imagine that on a long-term basis. Over 5 years, 9%. That's thousands of dollars that you're really just kind of throwing out the window by, having a lower or a higher credit score. So at this point, we've kind of established what credit is, the types of credit that there are out there, and kind of the good and the ugly of credit. And we know that one of the biggest concerns that people have is getting in trouble with credit. So maybe it's using too much credit, maybe it's irresponsible handling of credit. So let's look at some questions that we should ask ourselves before taking on any additional debt, maybe. So debt, again, can temporarily expand your income, but it's important to ask yourself, can I really afford it? Which is above simply just, asking yourself, can I really make this monthly payment? Because as we just witnessed, typically that monthly payment on a credit card is going to be very, very minimal, but you're not actually paying anything down on the principal. So you need to consider all of those factors. What are the opportunity costs? What will I be giving up to make this particular purchase? Or do I need to be giving something up to make this particular purchase? And will adding this debt, keep me from any of my other financial obligations, like paying myself first, which is hugely important. Meaning, are you depositing money into that savings account every month? It's very important to consider that. So understanding the difference between your needs and your wants is critical when we're talking about, taking on any additional debt or creating debt for a want. This can be very, very dangerous. So, debt can turn into quicksand very, very fast. It can really make you feel like you can never get away and like it's just continuously, sinking you down. And as we saw in the previous slide, it can certainly, cost you a lot of money in the end. So you want to be very, very careful not to have too much debt. And here are some of the warning signs that you might be, maybe in over your head. Some of these warning signs, your credit cards are maxed out. If you have to have that cashier kind of, try 2 or 3 or 4 different credit cards, that's certainly a warning sign that you have too much debt. If you're putting your day-to-day bills on credit cards, maybe having to pay, Comcast with your credit cards, or you have to, take cash out of your credit cards, that's certainly going to be a red flag that you might have too much debt. Arguing with your spouse or significant other is normal, on maybe a personal basis, but when it comes to arguing over money, this is usually a huge red flag. And if you don't know what you owe, we talked about doing a debt inventory. This is critical for a lot of us. And unfortunately, many of us don't take the time to do it because, again, it can be very, very scary, to sit down and actually, write out all of your credit cards. I've seen credit reports where some people have 10, 12, 15 credit cards. It can be very scary to really kind of sit down and see this in black and white. But really knowing where you're at is hugely, hugely important. And if you don't know how much you owe and you don't know what kind of interest rates your debt is at, that certainly can be a red flag that you might have too much debt. So if any of these hit close to home, you should definitely be taking steps to work through your personal situation. Whether you reach out to your financial institution, your existing financial institution, or, some sort of nonprofit. I always suggest that if you are going to reach out for any kind of debt consolidation or refinance, that you reach out to your existing financial institution or a nonprofit. I always suggest HUD.gov has many, many, many great places where you might be able to go and speak with a counselor, a HUD certified counselor, which means typically they're not going to take advantage of you, charge you for any kind of consolidation or anything like that. So when it does come to, potentially consolidating or doing anything like that, that is outside of what we're talking about today, where you can kind of manage it yourself, I would strongly urge you not to pay to do any kind of, organizational type of management. Any questions, my contact will be at the end of the seminar. So if you're not clear on what I'm talking about, but many nonprofits, such as KCT, offer what's called, maybe a debt checkup, or they offer to kind of sit down with you and really kind of review your debt and kind of start that inventory per se. So certainly I would urge you that if this seems a little bit overwhelming, you're not alone. It can be very, very overwhelming. So debt in and of itself can be very overwhelming, and it can become a vicious circle. In part, here's kind of what can happen if you can see the image here. Too much debt affects your credit, which can affect your savings potential because it affects your debt to income ratio. In the long term, your options for retirement, which means, again, you might be living paycheck to paycheck, which means you may be paying just the minimums on all your debt. So it's really just kind of a vicious circle. And it's best to really kind of know where you stand, when it comes to your debt to income ratio. Do your credit card balances exceed 10% of your income? If they do, that can be a problem for a lot of people, depending on what your income is. Now, one of the reasons that you want to look at this percentage wise is because we all have different income, right? So for somebody who makes $100,000 a year, $10,000 worth of credit card debt seems to be a little bit more manageable for them. But for somebody who makes, maybe $40,000 a year, $4,000 worth of credit card debt may not be as manageable. That can maybe spiral out of control very, very quickly. For somebody who makes $40,000 a year, having $10,000 worth of credit card debt is certainly going to be a little bit less manageable for them. So, you want to kind of look at it that way and really calculate how much credit card debt do I actually have in comparison to my income. And am I living, maybe beyond my means? So that's very, very important to take that into consideration. Do you have an emergency fund? If you have no emergency fund, this is an issue. We are living right now in a world where, we've never lived through this before, through a pandemic where, people have lost their jobs or people are getting very ill and are not being able to go to work, and their income has decreased. Having an emergency fund and having something to fall back on is hugely, hugely important for all of us. You should have a minimum of 3 months worth of your income sitting in a savings account just in case of an emergency. That is separate from your vacation savings account, separate from your Christmas club account. That is strictly just for emergencies. Because again, none of us are really guaranteed our income. None of us are guaranteed our job. And we just never know what can happen. So having an emergency fund is hugely, hugely important. And a lot of times when we find that somebody has too much debt, we also find there is no emergency fund. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, obviously there's probably not an emergency fund. So, how do you really get there? We have enough time here. We're going to watch a quick video, which I think is kind of cool.
Worrying about money is natural. Almost everyone does it at some point. But worrying can also be a sign there are serious problems you're avoiding. A persistent little reminder that these problems are not going away. Luckily, there are some things you can do to stop worrying and take back control. Ask yourself, what am I really worried about? If it's something you can't control, like the state of the economy, then don't waste time worrying about it. If you're tracking your spending, saving regularly, and living within your income, that's the foundation of financial peace of mind. But if there's a real problem, like too much credit card debt, then take action. There's no quick fix, but make a plan and stick to the plan. Simply doing something will make you feel better, and eventually your financials will start to look better too. With that in mind, there are 3 things anyone can do to reduce the financial anxiety. First, when you get your paycheck, do not immediately think about how you're going to spend it. Instead, think about ways to save it. Put a portion of it in a savings account for emergency use only. Even if it's a small amount, and add to it every month. The goal here is to be able to cover 3 months of expenses. Knowing you have a few bucks in a savings account is huge. Add another income stream. It doesn't have to be a second job. Sell your old stuff online or turn a hobby like freelance writing or photography into a side gig. Second, schedule an appointment with a financial advisor. It's never too soon to make sure you're on track for your life goals. You can open a personal retirement account at your credit union. If your company offers a matching program for your 401k, take advantage of it. Contribute at least the minimum so that your employer will kick in the same. You'll be amazed at how that money will grow over time. Third, did you know that your credit union is a not-for-profit financial cooperative? That means that they offer the same services as other financial institutions, but their mission is to help their members. So you don't have to tackle your problems alone. You have a team of professionals who can and really want to help you. They can sit down, look at your financials, offer advice, and help you develop an action plan. They even offer education so you can better understand money management. Do these three things: build up your savings, have a financial advisor, take a look at your whole financial picture, and visit your credit union for help. And you'll be worry-free in no time.
Worry-free in no time, right? That's everybody's goal. So how are we going to do that? In order to start saving money, you need to tackle and tackle your debt, and that may be overwhelming. So how can you do that? Well, by setting some SMART goals. That should be one of your first steps as well. These need to be specific. So you need to, again, know where you're at with your current debt. So do that inventory first. You need to make these goals measurable, meaning how much. They need to be adjustable, meaning take a look at what your options are. And how are you going to make that happen, which also needs to be realistic. And be sure to give yourself a timeline in which to achieve these. So let's talk about a little example here. Instead of just saying, I need to pay off my credit card debt, right? Which many of us have said, I need to pay off my credit card debt, or I need to pay off my student loans, or I need to pay off, my car, whatever that might be. You're less likely to really reach that goal. That's kind of a vague goal. But what you can do is sit down and say, okay, I'm going to pay off this $1,200 worth of credit card debt that I have, and I'm going to do that within the next 12 months. And the way that I'm going to do that is by not going to Starbucks anymore, or Dunkin' Donuts, or whatever, maybe you stop for coffee every day. Or instead of eating out, I'm going to take my lunch to work. I'm going to brown bag it. That would be an example of a more specific goal, a measurable goal, something that's adjustable. You can either stop, stopping it for your coffee, or you can take your lunch to work. It's also time oriented. It's within 12 months and hopefully within your budget. You can even go a step further to break this goal down and figure out, okay, $1,200 worth is $100 every month, because $1,200 seems like a lot, right? But it's $100 a month, which may still seem like a lot, right? If you don't have an emergency fund, or if you're living paycheck to paycheck, $100 can still be a lot. But if you divide that by how many weeks there are in a year, that turns out to be about $23, just over $23 a week. That seems a little bit more doable, right? We're kind of getting there. $23 a week divided by 7 would be about $3.30 per day. So can you do without an additional $3.30 per day? The answer could be yes for a lot of us. If you're stopping at Starbucks, I'm almost positive you're spending more than $3.30 a day. If you're stopping at Dunkin' Donuts, you may be right around there. So, really setting a goal for yourself and kind of breaking that goal down can really go a long ways. I'm also going to share a sheet with you here, setting some SMART goals. Just gives you an idea, short-term goals, and really for this, we're talking either short-term or medium-term goals. But you would just, for example, this is, I want to pay down my car. or I want to start an emergency fund, or I want to start just a savings account. So depending on what your goals are, you would list that first, how much you're going to save every month, what your target date is, or how long it's going to take you, and then obviously what your estimated cost is there at the end. So that can be very helpful, but certainly setting some SMART goals for yourself can be incredibly helpful. And how are we going to tackle that debt? Well, we're going to do it with some of these, suggestions here. You need to make a game plan. You need to understand, again, how much you owe. So you're going to do that inventory, get yourself organized, and really put a plan together, a spending plan. If you don't already have a budget, you're going to start doing a budget. So as you do that inventory of all of your debt, it's going to be much easier to transfer all of that information onto a budget sheet, whether that's a notebook, whether that's, QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is that you want to use. But transferring all that debt over, and really to make yourself a budget, it's really going to be a matter of calculating your income at that point. And keep in mind that when you're doing a budget, when you're trying to tackle all this debt, you want to make sure that you're using your net income, not your gross income. There's a huge difference for many of us here in America. That difference between our net and our gross income is about 30%, give or take, depending on what all we have coming out of our paychecks. So 30% is huge. You want to make sure that you're taking into account all of these numbers and you're doing your calculations based on your net income, what you actually bring home. This is how you're going to put your spending plan together or your budget. And I can also share a sheet on how to create a budget. It's a very kind of simple sheet. If you Google budget, you can find a slew of, either apps for your phone or, your financial institution. I know we have a budgeting tool on our website. So there's a ton of different ways that you can put a budget together. The point is to really kind of know where you stand when it comes to your debt, as well as your income, and really kind of put that plan together and get yourself organized. Another way that you can tackle debt is with the snowball effect, or what's called the debt snowball. This was kind of a method that was started by Dave Ramsey, if any of you are familiar with it, where he suggests that you start with the smallest balance that you have. So if you have 5 credit cards and the smallest balance on one is $200 and the largest balance is $1,000, you're going to start tackling that $200 one. So once you actually have your budget together and you've figured out what your discretionary income is, meaning how much you actually have at the end of the month left over, you may have an extra $50 left over at the end of the month. You would use that $50 to pay above and beyond that minimum payment on that smallest balance that you have. So if you owe $200 on that, on top of that, maybe $25 minimum payment, you're going to pay that additional $50 of your discretionary income. So you'll be making a $75 a month payment, which means $200. It's going to take you about 4 months roughly to pay off that credit card. Once you actually have paid off that credit card, you're going to use that $75 and apply it towards your next smallest credit card balance. So on top of making that minimum payment, you're going to send an extra $75 and however long it takes you to pay that balance off, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a snowball effect. You're kind of tackling those smallest balances, and for each one that you pay off, that's a huge compliment for a lot of us. There's many of us that have a lot of debt that we owe out there. So, really pat yourself on the back, maybe a small celebration, certainly not charging it on your credit cards, but maybe a small celebration might be in order every time that you pay something off that's on your, goal to pay off. But credit can have a pretty big impact on your credit report. So let's talk a little bit about that. In a nutshell, your credit report is a record of how you have paid your debt. Like it or not, if you're late more than 30 days, that's a mark on your credit report. And it can likely mean the difference between getting a good interest rate and getting a very costly interest rate. So you can see here, obviously you're identifying information, any inquiries, public record information, and then your credit information is all on your credit report. So if we talk about credit scores, your credit score is really just a snapshot at the moment that that credit report is actually pulled, of what debt you have in that moment and how you have paid all of those debts that you have in that moment. So it also kind of speaks to how likely you are to continue to pay your debts. It represents kind of your credit worthiness to other creditors. So this slide here gives you the range of credit scores, and it gives you an idea on what's good credit and what's not so great credit. Credit scores can go all the way up to 850. You know, if you are one of our members, hopefully you're aware that Savvy Money is available to you, so you can see your credit report on a daily basis if you wanted to. Many of your larger financial institutions and credit card companies are now offering something similar to that, where you can open up and see your credit report. I strongly suggest that you kind of just keep an eye on that. And I don't suggest that you do it daily. You know, that can be a little bit much, but as often as you possibly can, certainly keep an eye on, you know, what is happening with your credit. Your credit score, you know, for the most part, you really don't need it unless you're actually seeking out credit. But as long as you're making those payments on time, your score will follow. And one of the reasons for that is because there's 5 factors that go into determining what your Fico credit score is. And Fico is the credit score that most of your lenders will actually use to determine your credit worthiness. But there's 5 major variables that go into you know, what makes up that actual credit score. And as you can see, payment history is the largest factor that they take into account. And then the second largest is amounts owed, meaning what are the balances of the debt that you owe. So the more debt that you have, likely the lower your credit score is going to be. So that's where kind of, you know, carrying too much debt kind of goes hand in hand with potentially having a lower credit score. The more debt you have, or the more credit is available to you, you know, the lower your credit score might actually be. So besides the credit score, a lot of times creditors or lenders are also looking at some other factors. Your credit score kind of goes hand in hand with character. And most of your lenders, you know, take your credit score into consideration on, you know, not just your credit history, but, you know, honesty and reliability of that borrower. So it really kind of speaks to your character and, you know, how trustworthy you might be. Your lenders are also obviously looking at your capacity. So how much debt do you already currently have? How does that compare to your income stream? And, you know, they kind of analyze that, which is the reason that they'll ask you for, you know, your pay stubs or tax returns. And then they're also looking at your capacity. You know, how able are you to, I'm sorry, your capital would be the last one. How able are you to potentially pay this off if you absolutely had to? So how much is in your savings account? Do you have any kind of investments? You know, any additional assets? So, you know, these are the 3 C's of credit that most of your lenders are actually looking at. So we talked about credit scores, some ideas on how to help improve those, as you can see here. We also offer an understanding credit class, which is very popular. But keep an eye out if you can, attend any webinars or sessions on how to better understand your credit. Credit is a finicky thing. So, there's a lot of variables that go into that, but checking your credits annually or, every 4 months is what I usually like to suggest. Annualcreditreport.com is a website that was kind of built by all three bureaus to make it easier for you to access your free credit report. Annualcreditreport.com is a great website to go into to kind of keep tabs on what your credit is doing. And each one of the three major credit bureaus owes you one free copy of your credit report every year. So that's what I am talking about when I say maybe pull one every 4 months. So maybe you start with TransUnion, and then 4 months later you pull Equifax, and then 4 months later you pull Experian, just to kind of keep tabs on what is happening with your credit on a more constant basis, other than just once a year. Checking your credit report can be very, very important, not just for managing your debt or keeping on top of your credit, but also for fraud or identity theft or anything like that. So I very, very strongly suggest that you do that on a fairly regular basis. Obviously, paying your bills on time all the time and paying down that debt can also be a huge factor for improving a credit score if you need to do so. And lastly, if you already have good credit, or you get to the point where you have very good credit, some tips on how to maintain that credit. Obviously having a spending plan and knowing exactly where you're at with all of your debt, your monthly payments, when those are due, paying all those bills on time. Having credit, but not too much credit, having a good mix of credit. As we saw on that pie chart, that Fico pie chart, having a mix of credit, how long you've had credit for, those are all things that are taken into consideration, as well as how much credit are you actually seeking out, which are your inquiries, right? So if you're constantly seeking out credit, you'll have a list of inquiries, everybody that's kind of looked into your credit, and that can be a red flag for some lenders as well. So certainly calculating what your debt to income ratio is and trying to stay within that, 30 to 35% is also a great idea. And it kind of demonstrates some stability to your lenders if you are seeking out, maybe a car loan or thinking about, purchasing a home or anything like that. So with that being said, I am a little bit over my time, but not too bad. But that is really all that I have for you. I think we're going to open it up for questions or comments or anything else that might be out there. Krista?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was so informative. It's interesting to hear about how, credit or debt can work for you, as opposed to against you.
Yeah, it's not all negative, right?
Right.
I had to put in some good points in there.
Yeah.
It can be good, right? A lot of us, might be either homeowners or looking to be homeowners someday. That can be a positive thing. Ultimately, it'll be an investment in the long run. So
yeah, for sure. We don't have any questions on Zoom or on Facebook. But I was just thinking about some potential things that people might be thinking. So when we say pay your credit card bill, in full, or pay off the debt right away, so you use your credit card and then you pay it off right away. Some people might think, well, then what is the point of ever having a credit card, right?
And again, that kind of goes back to, we've kind of fallen into bad habits with credit cards. Credit cards in and of themselves are a very, very new concept to us. I can remember my parents in particular, and I'm probably much older than you, Krista, but my parents had one credit card. It was like a Montgomery Ward's credit card. And that was it. I think Montgomery Wards and like Sears were the only credit cards that you can obtain. Whereas now, everybody has a credit card. Every store can offer you a credit card. There's so many Visas, Discover, MasterCard, American Express, all sorts of different types, because it's supply and demand, right? And really what has happened is, because it's such a new concept to us, we assume that I use my credit card because I can't afford something, when realistically it should be, I use my credit card to help my credit score and to prove to other creditors that I'm a responsible adult that can handle my finances. So I'm using this credit card very temporarily. If you don't pay it off immediately, really paying it off at the end of the month when you do get that bill means that they have floated you money for 28 days, right? Which is a pretty good deal. But if you can pay it off at when you do get that bill, then you can save yourself all of that interest. And for many of us, like I said, the average interest rate on a credit card is 19%. That's huge.
Oh, high.
So, yeah. So, a lot of times, I don't know about you, but I obtained my first credit card because the cashier at Old Navy said, "Would you like to save 20% on your purchase today?" And I said, "Of course I would." But did I pay off that credit card? I did not. Which meant I ended up paying more than that 20% because it was at like a 24% interest rate. So I didn't save myself anything. In fact, I paid 4% more, or probably more than that. I don't remember how long it took me to pay it off, but, so it doesn't save us anything, and ideally it's really kind of just, we should think of credit cards as a temporary, 28-day short-term 0% interest loan.
Right, exactly. As a tool, really, to build credit.
Exactly.
So that point leads me to another question. If, let's say that is what you're doing and you're following that, you're paying off your debt every time, you use it. Is there a negative consequence of having a lot of credit cards open on your credit report?
There can be. It depends on, whether you're seeking to, the best example is are you looking to buy a house? Many times we'll hear, and I was a mortgage lender for about 12 years before I was a financial wellness educator. Many times I heard my coworkers say, "Oh, you're going to need to close out some of these credit cards," because unfortunately what happens is if you were applying for a mortgage and you had, let's say, 10 credit cards and you have a $5,000 credit limit on all of those credit cards, well, potentially you can indebt yourself overnight $50,000 worth, right? That's huge, huge. So you'll hear a lot of mortgage lenders say you're going to need to close some of these credit cards out because you have those available balances. What I would normally suggest is, if you saw the Fico pie chart, longevity also is a huge factor when it comes to your credit score. So the longer you've had credit for, potentially the higher your credit score is. Instead of closing those out, you really should, kind of look at your credit situation before actually going out and getting pre-approved and kind of make sure that all your ducks are in a row. But I would certainly usually suggest to my customers, don't necessarily close it out because I do see that this is one of your oldest credit cards.
Right.
Contact your creditor and have them lower that limit. Instead of $5,000, maybe lower that limit down to $500. Eventually, once you purchase your house and once you've done whatever it is that you're looking to do, you can always reach out to them and have them increase that. Depending on how close you are to maxing that credit card out. There could be other issues that you have there as well, but certainly reaching out to, either your financial institution, months before, depending on what it is that you're doing. House purchase is usually a good idea to reach out months prior to actually getting pre-approved. Because everybody's, financial situation is very, very different.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's all very individualized.
Right. Well, this has been so helpful. I have one more question.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and this is just more of like a meta question. So sometimes people don't know the difference between a credit union and a bank. Can you just speak to that for just a moment?
Absolutely. Like I said, I was a mortgage lender for over 12 years, have been in the banking industry for going on 20 years now. And I myself never knew the difference, to be honest with you. I thought, credit union, bank, same thing. A credit union is a not-for-profit organization. The sole purpose of a credit union is to help its members and or the community. So offering things like these financial wellness webinars, offering things like debt management option where you can come in and kind of sit down with one of our representatives to kind of go over. A lot of times, we will kind of, for lack of a better word, cannibalize our own loans. If we see that, hey, you know what, we have this unsecured loan that we did for you 2 years ago, and now you've improved your credit because we've kind of talked you through it. You know what, let's refinance this and get you into this lower interest rate, secured loan or something like that. It might seem silly because as an organization, we're losing money potentially by doing so, but it's in the best interest of our members, and our community. And really the ultimate goal as a nonprofit is to help, really.
Right.
So that's the largest difference. Obviously we're a little bit smaller. We're not your regular, big, huge bank. But the other difference too is that we work in what's called a bank share co-op, where many credit unions nationwide kind of share services. So even though we are not, we don't have a KCT in Florida, you may be in Florida on vacation, you can go into a credit union in Florida and do the same thing that you would do here, withdraw money, deposit money, do many of the same things that you would be able to do at your own credit union. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Okay, well, I did one last dip into Facebook and our Q&A, and there aren't any questions. So thank you so much. And thank you to the Office of Barbara Hernandez and to Representative Barbara Hernandez for partnering on us all with this program. But special thanks to Marlon Glenn at KCT Credit Union. This was very, very informative, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. And we'll see you next month on May 20th. We're doing our home buyer.
That's right. And it's a great time for it. So
absolutely. So make sure to join us if you're joining us right now, May 20th, same time.
Great. Thank you so much, Marlon. And
thanks,
bye, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.